And we're live. All right, I am Dark Age Sage, and I am here joined by Hitler Hated Christ, not our guy from Twitter. Today's the first episode of Bourbon Democrats, my series. We'll discuss a variety of different topics, ideologies, whatever, where I have like intelligent guests come on from social media. Today's topic is revisionist history. So, Mr. Christ, what do you think when you hear the word revisionist history?
I like Mr. Christ more than Mr. Hitler. I think that's funny, but yeah, I've been trying to do not our guy more just because the Hitler hated Christ moniker is so much of a mouthful.
Yeah.
So I guess what you mentioned you wanted to have me on to talk about revisionist history. I mean I'm not a historian by trade or by education or anything like that. It's totally a hobby for me, and really mostly came out of just the intersection of politics and Christian theology. But I don't know, when I usually these days, if I hear somebody refer to themselves as a historical revisionist, what they really mean is some sort of conspiracy theorist that also likes history. That's kind of what I think it is, at least on the internet today, most of the time. I think that's not necessarily what it has to mean, though. I do think there are a lot of people that there have been like Civil War history revisionists. There have been Napoleonic War revisionist stuff. I mean, there's a pretty wide swath. I mean, even stuff down to like, I know there's been some disagreement around like the sinking of the Lusitania, and that kind of thing. There've been a lot of people that have claimed to be revisionists on those topics. That I think are pretty serious. But when I hear the word online, honestly, my initial thought is, okay, this guy's probably just like running on conspiracy memes. But
Probably, yeah. But and I think that view is very similar to most people's views of the term revisionist. But in people across the political spectrum, left, right, center, apolitical people, they all use the term in a negative connotation. Like it's like, oh, you're lying about history, you're making up something, but it really shows their ignorance because that's not what revisionism means. Revisionism means, let me see. Revisionism means nothing more or less than effort to correct a historical record in the light of a more complete collection of historical facts, a more calm political atmosphere, and a more objective attitude. It's basically historical revisionists, in the traditional sense of the word, are people who look back at the mainstream historiography, and they question it. It's like, okay, maybe the original historians or what the government tries to sell us, maybe that's not true. Maybe they were wrong. Maybe there's a different interpretation, or maybe they just everything they told us was lies about this given period. And historically, people like actual respected historians would call themselves historical revisionists. In the 1920s and 30s, many of the most respected historians in America were self-described revisionists, and more often than not, they were right in whatever topic they wished to revise.
Well, it also, I mean, I have more respect, I guess, from people who come at it from the direction of like, here is my proposed thesis. If they're doing it experimentally, right? If somebody comes at something and says, I think XYZ happened, you're saying ABC happened. This is the evidence from my perspective, and I think it's better than yours, right? I have more respect for that sort of revisionism than the, hey, ABC perspective is wrong. I'm not going to propose an alternative, right? I'm just going to like try to poke holes from different directions in ABC narrative and then provide nothing with better explanatory power the other direction, right? Like for instance, and I'm not sure how versed you are in like theology circles, and I'm not deep into the history of like slavery in the United States or whatever, but Douglas Wilson, who's a theologian in kind of my sphere of Christianity, he wrote a book about slavery, and one of the things he did in this book about slavery was he proposed that the relationship between slaves and masters in the United States for a period of time, or a large period of time, was one that was not characterized strictly by animosity. And he,
That is,
what's that?
that's true.
Right,
That is
and he
generally
defends
true.
it by looking at like the witnesses or like the slaves themselves once they were freed and what they had reported and how they felt toward their masters that were their previous masters when they were slaves and that kind of thing. And he sort of builds his case, but he comes at it from the perspective of, hey, we're being told that this was that this relationship was always full of horrible animosity. This is my evidence for the contrary, and this is the narrative of what I think happened. And oftentimes, I don't see people who claim at least to be revisionist online sort of providing that alternative that's reasonable. You warned me that we should, if we're going to talk about the Hall of Cost, that we should maybe not set off the YouTube algorithm so much. But this would be one of the examples, I guess, in this because I see a lot of people approaching revisionism kind of around World War II entirely, but specifically that topic from the perspective of, hey, I want to prove this narrative wrong, and they don't really care what alternative narrative they're proposing. They just want to prove that one wrong because they're approaching it ideologically. Which is how there's certain individuals that I follow that I would align with when it comes to things like how the Jews were treated in that period. We'd agree on that, but they would disagree with even some of the early like geopolitical stuff in World War II with me, right? And they would probably be revisionists surrounding like Hitler's invasion of Poland or something like this, right?
Yeah.
And those guys I have a lot more respect for, merely because they're actually providing an alternative and making a case for that, and not just kind of throwing stuff out there to attack a narrative for ideological reasons. So I know that's a mouthful, but
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think we'll discuss more of that later. But I would briefly like to discuss an example of positive historical revisionism, specifically on the topic of Herbert Hoover and the Great Depression. So, how much do you know of like Hoover's handling of the Great Depression and his like personal political philosophy and all that?
not a lot. So you can teach us.
Yeah, so I wrote about this on a Substack maybe 6 months back. How Hoover in the Great Depression, how I was taught about it as a Canadian, was that he did nothing. Like they tell us that he just basically sat back and just did nothing, just let it get worse with any like measures to prevent the depression. I know John Green on his Crash Course series, which basically every high schooler in this generation is forced to watch. He has said that Hoover refused to do public works projects, refused to spend money, like create jobs, like raise wages, not he didn't enforce what he called Keynesian pattern in the economy.
Right.
But it's really like that's the exact opposite of the truth. And Murray Rothbard, in his 1963 revisionist history book, America's Great Depression, he just completely dismantles that narrative. And it's really amazing just what autistic detail Murray Rothbard goes into on all the different ways Hoover intervened in the economy, not just during his tenure as president, but also during his tenure as a Secretary of Commerce under Warren G. Harding and Calvin Coolidge. How like he like pestered Warren G. Harding during the 1920 Depression. Just to go off topic briefly, the 1920 Depression was the most forgotten depression in American history. It was bad. It was like 15% unemployment. I think that was one of the worst depressions in American history up to that point in time. And Warren G. Harding, the president at the time, he didn't do anything because presidents at this point in time weren't expected to intervene in the economy. They knew that a recession, depression, whatever you like to call it, is a perfectly natural thing. So they just like wait for it to pass without like any extra spending, any extra taxation, whatever. And it did. The Great Depression the Depression of 1920 ended in like less than a year without any government intervention. In the words of Harvard economist Benjamin Anderson, it was the last free market recession. And every recession since then has been a statist recession, where they basically try to intervene in the economy as much as possible. And Hoover, like he spent more money than any other president up to that point in time. Like he consecutively every year in office increased spending. He had the largest, like the 1932 Revenue Act was quite literally the largest singular tax increase in American history up to that point in time. And with like John Green, he talked about like John Maynard Keynes in his book and his like main economic philosophy and saying, oh, Hoover didn't do that. Here's the thing. John Maynard Keynes was inspired by Hoover. Like he went to the States in 1930, saw like the public works projects, the artificial wages that Hoover was trying to create. And John Maynard Keynes was literally lecturing Ramsay MacDonald, the then British Prime Minister, saying he should adopt Hoover's policies in regards to depression. So it's really insane because the whole narrative that Hoover didn't do anything, it was like prevalent in the 1960s. Like when Rothbard published his book, Herbert Hoover was still alive. That's what really gets me. Is he was still alive. He never pretended like he was this laissez-faire capitalist type of guy. But like the New Dealers, FDR kind of just painted him as such in the decades following. I guess.
Well, being compared to FDR, I mean, this is one thing with revisionism is like the cultural context of what's going on at the time can color things long after you're gone, right? So like FDR being so much of a larger influence in the economy and generally leaning toward command economy stuff, that can definitely influence how people view Hoover, even if, like you're saying, he did do quite a bit, or at least did some, right?
Yeah. And I know Hoover was actually close to some socialists. Like during his tenure as Secretary of Commerce, I'm pretty sure he had a relationship with the socialist president of the American Federation of Labor. In fact, John Nance Gardner, who was a senator from Texas and would go on to be FDR's first vice president, he accused Hoover of taking America down the road to socialism. And I think he was also right. He was very, when you look at the textbook definition of socialist, many of his policies could be seen as socialist in one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, so I would never say that all revisionism is wrong, or that there's a certain point in time where history gets locked in and we can't, come up with like better interpretations of what happened in the past. I mean, there's still even there are guys that come out with papers that study even like Josephus's writings from soon after the time of Christ, and because of more research and more documents and things like this that we find, or manuscripts throughout history, that they've come to different conclusions about the authenticity of certain passages and things like this. And you could say that would be revisionism, right? I mean, the Dead Sea Scrolls in biblical literature, that really solidified the earlier date of quite a few Old Testament books, puts Isaiah quite a bit quite a bit longer before Jesus than I think was thought of before by many. And so that could be understood as revisionism, but in my mind, the proposition is, hey, these things were not written then, they were written this time, right? Or something like that. It's not just like, no, you're wrong, right? Or that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but I'd also like to say that the reason that certain historical narratives are pushed is because it has a political motive. The reason that the narrative that Hoover was a non-interventionist, laissez-faire president has a political motive. It's used, this myth, to justify further government intervention in the economy, further public works projects, tax increase, whatever. It's a narrative that's meant to keep people in line. It's like, oh, you need to understand, we're raising taxes 70% because if we don't, this depression will get worse. We'll go into depression, like in the 1920s with Herbert Hoover, who didn't do anything apparently.
Well, and there's infinite ways for people to interpret historical events insofar as they're able to use it for political rhetoric. So, like, for instance, boomers have used, like right-wing boomers have used the Vietnam War to say that we should be significantly more decisive and have like more shock and awe in our interactions in other countries, right? Because the idea is that like we meandered in Vietnam and we weren't decisive enough, and that was the problem, as opposed to the more left-leaning people or libertarians that are non-interventionist and would have a completely different reading of that. you see the same thing too with World War II history, right? Like what normie conservative people take away from that is very different in their rhetoric from what the left does, and that doesn't mean that there are not events that benefit one side more than the other in regard to their political rhetoric, but it's important to realize that they're, I guess, like in the same way when you're doing any sort of historical investigation, even if it is revisionist, to do your best to not allow your current political machinations impede on how you're going to interpret things. And I think that's happened both directions with World War II. I happen to think it's happened lately more one particular direction, which I've been focusing on. But anyway,
I just like to talk about something. So, as you know, there's a lot of like people online who attempt to seek out some historical revisionism, like the neo-no-no Germans that you encounter on your Twitter page, who basically say that Jewish people weren't murdered during the Second World War. I've seen different interpretations. Some say that they were murdered, but it was only 271,000.
right?
Others say, like the alternative hypothesis, he says that the Jewish population in Europe actually increased throughout the course of the Second World War. Others put the number at like 1 or 2 million. Like there's a lot of interpretations. So I just want to hear you like discuss them, why they think that, why they seek out revisionism on the topic of World War II.
Yeah, I mean, so when it comes to just a number for that, I usually just say millions, because I've seen pretty reasonable calculation procedures to get anywhere between like 5.2 to like 7 mil of total Jews that were killed during World War II in Europe, right? Which would be almost all of them would be. The things like the 271K number are based on memes. There's a specific document from like the German Foreign Registry Service. I think it's the German Foreign Registry Office, or Special Registry Office, that is covering certified death counts, and it's people that requested a death certificate for a family member from a specific camp. And then somebody came along and took that document, which has a 271K figure, and then added a bunch of English on top of it. And people just kind of roll with it, even though it's photoshopped and doesn't represent what they mean. The total number matters, I guess, less in my mind, which is why I usually just say millions, than the idea of just a very large systematic scale. And that's usually where, in that conversation, is where I'll find people that would identify as revisionists that are not the sort of Twitter tier drivel that you find on there. Most people, even from like Coda and some of these other forums online that are revisionists, will say the numbers are in the millions or above 1 million in terms of like Jews that were intentionally killed. You get that even through Einsatzgruppen reports and that kind of thing. Like, you don't even need to believe at all in the camp system if you want to get into those kind of numbers and those kind of territories. So you really I can quickly identify, I think, when somebody is really just running off of memes versus if somebody has a little bit more knowledge of it. So somebody, I'm not super familiar with, you said it was Alt Hype who says that the population goes up.
Yeah, he said in his, I think the post was called "The Jewish Population Miracle," where he showed a graph that said that the Jewish population of Europe prior to World War II was like 11.1 million, and in 1945 it was like 11.3 or 11.5 million or something.
Well, any 1945 numbers I'm going to be extremely skeptical of, because it's my understanding that basically none of those countries were at a point where they were able to do any kind of accurate census taking until about like 48, 49. So anything that purports numbers like in 45, I'm initially going to be real skeptical of anyway. I have seen some I've seen Russian census data that has a pretty drastic drop off in Jews for Russian territory. I think that's 49 is the one that I've seen. It's like late 30s to 49. And there's a whole there are whole breakdowns for how these are calculated among academic historians. If you're ever interested in that I can send you.
Sure.
But the one I see quite a bit on that is like this like World Almanac thing. Are you familiar with this? Have you seen that
I'm
around?
not. No.
So there's this group that made this thing called the World Almanac for the longest time, and it was kind of just like this curiosity, kind of like the Guinness Book of World Records a little bit. Um, but if you're familiar with like a farmer's almanac, it's almost like a predictive text, and it was supposed to contain all sorts of figures for the total amount of people of different religions in different territories. And in that World Almanac, I forget which year it is, but it's quickly following World War II. They record an increase in the Jewish population for like the whole continent of Europe, I think. And the thing that makes this funky though is that there's other places in the World Almanac where they directly copy numbers. Like I believe they copy like the 1939 to 43 numbers directly. Like they're just copy pasted the same numbers. And there's no information in the text on where they get these. So it seems like they may just have been making crap up.
Yeah.
Period. So that's why I'm going to take census data over like weird unsourced stuff that seems to be copy pasted from previous years. And I haven't really seen from the revisionist end of things on the census data much other than that kind of thing. So if you find it, let me know. I'm always curious. But
Well, yeah. Just like to talk about another group of revisionists. Don't know how up to date with them you are, but I'd like to talk about the tanky communist, like
oh yeah,
Stalin apologists, Holodomor. As
right.
well, I saw this meme that you posted. It was like Franklin documents the Holodomor.
Oh yeah.
And did you see the comments on that one?
I don't remember there being tankies in there, but I will say I do occasionally run into some who think I'm like their friend or whatever, and then I usually like tell them off pretty quick because I'm not here for any of that crap either. But what did you see on that I don't remember?
I don't know, people saying like, "Oh, I hope Franklin has good luck with his fictional novel," or
Oh, really?
Franklin. Sorry, what was that?
Oh, I was just saying I don't remember them commenting that. I'm looking up the post right now. I'm curious. I'm gonna try to find it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I could be confusing you with a different post, or some
No, it's
people
okay.
saying, "Oh, I can't wait for Franklin to find out that it was the Kulaks that did the Holodomor."
Right.
Some bullshit like that.
Right.
So there's other ones that like deny Stalin killing civilians. Like, I know like Stalin ordered the execution, or the NKVD ordered the execution of 20,000 Polish POWs in a forest in Russia. I don't remember what that massacre was called. Usually all the bullshit that Stalin did, mass deportations, political arrests, executing Orthodox priests, etc. There's like many people. I think they're probably more numerous than the neo-nono Germans than but I think they're less active, less vocal than those guys, you know? Because I feel like there's a lot of like YouTube channels, like Second Thought, Hassan Piker, Breakthrough News, that all just Stalin apologists that deny Holodomor, deny Mao Zedong's purges, or justify them, you know? So what are your thoughts on their thought process?
Well, I think it's the same thing that I heckle with, on the right. I think the one you're maybe thinking is the Caton massacre. Is that the one you're thinking about?
That's it.
Yeah. So that's Soviets against the Poles, and that's an interesting one because that one was like revisionists. I mean, that kind of came out pretty quickly, but at the time that was blamed on Germany, and then was later to be determined to have been the Soviet Union. Interestingly enough, about that one is I reference the Goebbels diary quite a bit, not just around things related to the Holocaust, but also things related to the premise of my account and Hitler's theology. And in that, Goebbels talks about how they didn't do the the Katyn massacre, I believe, and that's one of my arguments against the idea that the Russians somehow invented the Goebbels diary, which I get people claiming all the time, because it doesn't make sense for them to write a propaganda piece and then have Goebbels directly not take accountability for this. Right. So anyway.
I would like to say, I don't know this guy's name off the top of my head, but you know, academic agent, right?
I've seen him. Yeah, I've seen him around.
Yeah, I had this guy on his YouTube channel. He's some old 70-something historian, who is like tanky communist sympathizer, Stalin apologist. He said that Stalin killed 0 people, and this guy, I don't think it was on the interview with academic agent, but he has said, like, to this day, that the Katyn massacre was done by the Germans, which is completely it's completely insane, because the Katyn massacre happened in 1939 in the middle of Russia, hundreds of miles from the German-Russian border. So he's basically arguing that in 1939, like, the Germans took a bunch of Polish, crossed the border, like, in hundreds of miles deep into Russia, killed these guys, and then went back. And the Russians never talked about it. That is insane.
Yeah, and is it here, I'm gonna send you a link. I don't know if I could pronounce this guy's name. You can tell me if that's the guy's name. I just sent you this link, but there was a guy that got I think he got convicted. I'm not sure the results of the case. I'd have to double check, but he at least got charged in the Czech Republic for being a communist, denying the Katyn massacre. So because there are laws in other, in various countries in Europe that are that do ban atrocity denial, not just related to the Nazis, but also communist stuff. And so he got caught in one of these. And so there are guys today that are still on that, and it's pretty obvious. It's because they have ideological motivations and they publish their stuff in like commie magazines, and they're not out here putting out academic papers that are peer reviewed in historiographical historiographical journals. Anyway.
Yeah, I would just like to say back on the academic agents thing. Like, I'm not against him having like commie people on his YouTube channel. Like, I think he's the right to have anyone on he wants. But here's the thing. He doesn't debate them, refute them, or anything. Like, he's gone like full tanky academic agent. He's like reposting pro-Stalin propaganda on his Twitter. And it's like, it gives vindication to horseshoe theory, which is something I really hate. So,
well, that's the Haas, like the whole infrared Haas guy. You know that guy? He's like he's like an anti-Western. He's I think he's like pro modern Russia, but he also is like pro Soviet Union now, and he does the same kind of crap, and it's all the same, just the other direction. But anyway.
Yeah, but basically I want to ask, so why do you think that some of these guys that are more traditionally right-wing and may like defend Hitler like academic agent has done, why do you think they also support Stalin? That's like not a fringe position anymore. I haven't seen more and more people who like both Hitler and Stalin, which just boggles my mind personally.
Well, so I'm going to give you, I'm a Christian, so I'm going to give you a theological answer if you're ready for me to Bible thump you for a minute.
Sure, yeah.
So Proverbs 8 is a proverb written from the perspective of like Lady Wisdom, and it talks about how people behave when they hate Lady Wisdom, right? And when people hate instruction and biblical godly reproof and authority and things like this. And it ends the chapter, and again, this is from the perspective of Wisdom herself, saying, all who hate me, meaning Wisdom, love death. And I do think there's something to be said about that is true. That I think that a lot of people who have either rejected the idea of God as a moral authority, or have some sort of disdain for biblical principles and how to treat others. I think their hatred of that wisdom that's given to us in Scripture, I think ultimately results in a mindset where they love death. And I think that's reflected politically by tankies, and I think it's also by Nazis, where they kind of get off on this idea of this sort of darker idea, and I think it also gets mixed in with things like eugenic and envy over wealth and all these things that that Scripture warns us about. And so I would tie it to that as a spiritual problem, and that's how you can have guys swing, I guess, from one end of the thing to the other with the horseshoe theory, like you're talking about. So
Yeah. And just like to talk about something else. So why do you think these people like push their beliefs, especially nowadays? Like you see more and more with the tankies, you've seen them like somewhat prevalent for decades. But with like the people that you argue with, like the World War II German supporters, why do you think, in your opinion, that you've been seeing like an uptick in them in recent years? I have my own theory, but I want to hear yours first.
well, I guess like I've seen a more prominent presence of them on like the more surface web stuff, like on Twitter or now X. And some of that has to do with the reduction of censorship, which I think overall may be a good thing. And I definitely advocate for to an extent that it's not just beyond reason with people like, posting pornography or, trying to kill people or something on the internet through doxing. But I don't know how much more prevalent it really is now than it was like in 2015. It just wasn't as visible. I mean, I knew a lot of guys that were all caught up in this back like even before Trump. And I don't really buy it as being an epidemic, but I do think that there are more ill-informed versions of it that are able to be accessed now by a lot more people, and that's how we get like really some of the crappy junk that we see on Twitter more often from both the tanky and the right-wing side. I think a lot of it has to do with spiritual decline. I think young men are looking for something to aspire to. They're looking for something to become. They're looking for an identity, and they're finding all these things through the internet. And pretty much whoever can come along and tell the best story to them is gonna win. And it's kind of a dice roll on if that's a tanky or if that's some wignat,
Yeah, I would agree with everything you're saying, but I would add to it. I think the reason that we've seen an uptick in it is disillusionment. Like I'm
Right.
reading this book right now, Perpetual War for Perpetual Peace, which is a collection of revisionist essays on diplomacy leading up to World War II. And I don't know the exact page, but Harry Elmer Barnes, and before you say anything, Harry Elmer Barnes did later in his career deny the murder of Jewish people in World War II. But this is before he did that, before he kind of went off the rails. But and also, just like to clarify my personal philosophy with that, like just because someone had a belief that I completely disagree with doesn't mean that they don't have a good point here or there or can be trusted with some other matters. But anyway, he said that he believes that the only way that you can see large-scale revisionism of World War II is if there's a thorough disillusionment with the establishment. And this was written in like 1951. And he was right. It's like we've seen a disillusion with the establishment, how it's like the whole World War II history, myth, whatever you like to call it, it's used by the establishment to justify their policies. They're like, oh, like if you don't want 10 million Arabs in your hometown, you're Hitler.
Right, you're
If you
Hitler,
don't,
right?
that's been for decades. If you like don't like this, you're Hitler. If you don't want your child going to drag queen story hour, you're Hitler. You're like they've been calling everyone they don't like Hitler like before me or you were even born.
Right.
And like I don't know, I personally, as a young white man in Canada, I was demonized by my English teacher, called a Nazi, called this, called that, blah blah blah. Said everyone like Trump's Hitler. Well, I'm just gonna go off topic and talk about a experience I had in a grade 11 English class. Do you want to hear it?
Lay it on us. Go for it.
All right. So we were reading a book I can't remember what it was. Try to Google it. It was about some Jewish kid that survived Auschwitz. And I don't know, like halfway through reading the book, like we came into class and like all the lights were out, completely dark. And the
Oh
teacher, Miss
no.
McKinley, 50-something generic liberal English teacher aesthetic, was saying, like, all right, so we're hearing about Hitler killing the Jews in this book. But what is happening in this book is happening today in the United States.
Oh my
Right
god.
now, Trump
Oh,
is killing Mexicans.
oh
Like, I
my
don't.
gosh.
Yeah, I'm so serious. It's not like she wasn't one of those people. It's like, oh, maybe years from now, Trump will do
No, yeah, she was like, it's happening right
right
now. Yeah.
now, he's like Holocausting Mexicans.
Oh my
And
god.
I was flabbergasted. Everyone, like what? I'm proud that literally everyone in the class, except the EA, like the kid that took care of the disabled children, like she agreed with the teacher. Everyone else, literally everyone, had something against it. It's like, that's offensive. That's not true. Blah blah blah. It was all over the political spectrum. Like I had like this kid, this douchebag, behind me in class, David, who was like pretty right wing. He was from America, Trump supporter. Like he was against what she was saying. I had this lesbian liberal like near the back of the class. She was against what the teacher was saying. She was like, she backpedaled on the whole thing. It's like, oh, I'm not saying that Trump is like murdering Mexicans right now, which she fucking did. She fucking did say that. I'm just saying it could happen. So she was like bullshit and got like off topic in
Yeah.
a bunch of
Yeah.
places. And I wonder how many experiences did people like that have
Oh,
with their
probably a
English
lot.
teacher? Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I think probably a lot. I mean, I got called, like I was in college when Trump got elected, and I definitely, dude, I got, I mean, I've said this before. I got doxxed by Antifa actually after college for various things, but um I totally got that, a ton of that. I mean, and the thing is though, it's like the way I see it, I mean, I made a tweet about this in like a month ago where I was talking about how like I think the Holocaust as a tool politically is very interchangeable, and that I think what we need to be doing is making people look ridiculous who try to compare like basic immigration enforcement with the Holocaust. Like the
yes,
issue, the reason that's ridiculous is not because um, mass murdering people isn't evil, right? The reason that's ridiculous is because that's not what's happening, right? And I think that we lose track of it when we are chasing what are ultimately like interchangeable tools to try to discredit it, as opposed to just saying no, like the parallel you're drawing is wrong and here's why, right?
yeah.
Have you seen that meme that's like the guy who's like running the Jews out of Auschwitz, like the Nazi
Get out
guy,
of
and he's
here.
like, and stay out. Yeah, exactly. And I posted a document, I think it's from 44, underneath one of those one time that was it's a German police document about how they were not allowing Jews to leave Germany in view of the final solution, was the text. And so it's like, no, they were not, this was not a deportation that, like, this is not like, oh, we're getting all the illegals who are overstaying their visas and deporting them. Like they weren't letting them leave, like
Yeah.
anyway. But that's what I think we need, those type of things. But I think you're right that a lot of people have been affected by that sort of thing. Like I totally agree with that, and that's an issue for sure. And it's just just sort of like the leftist psychology around wanting to be this sort of avenger against the evils they see in the world, and they ultimately kind of like deep down want to live in some society where that's going on, so they can like feel like they would do the right thing or something, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I think, like, I'm good that I had like a World War II great grandfather who's like really based and cool. I mean, even though he died when I was pretty young, but I think a lot of
Which
people
side was he
didn't.
on? Which side was he on?
Canada side,
Oh, based. Okay.
yeah. Anyway, but I think a lot of like people in my generation who've been like had the experiences that I had or similar experience is or just been demonized. It's like they see these awful people who
Right.
advocate openly for people being killed, replaced,
Right.
whatever. And they're like, Hitler is the ultimate bad guy.
Right.
1940s Germany ultimate bad guy. That's like the complete pinnacle of evil. So they think, okay, all these people who hate me, who want me dead, who want horrible things to happen to me and treat me like shit, they don't like Hitler. So I will like Hitler and
Right.
protest. It's like, therefore, Hitler's good. If these horrible people don't like Hitler, if the World War II mythology has been used to demonize me, dispossess me on it, and like keep me out of employment,
Right.
therefore, I'm going to go opposite. Therefore, Hitler good. That's like the
Right.
general thought process I think that's happening, you know?
Yeah, I mean that's the difference. I guess like one of the things I've heard is what wisdom is knowing the difference between right and almost right. Because if you're almost right, you can also be very wrong. And I think that's definitely part of it, is the overcorrection component. And the issue with that is when you get into that mode or that mindset, you're establishing presuppositions with your own soul where you're like, okay, I can kind of excuse whatever so long as I'm bucking against this thing, right? And I think once you've established that sort of thinking process, then if the thing you're bucking against shifts, then you can end up a tanky, right? You can end up kind of wherever, because you've already sort of conceded yourself to this motivated thought process that that leads to a place that's really not based in like a love of the truth, you know?
Yeah. What do I want to say? I'd like to say that with like the leftists, like they created these monsters. And these people who like said killing Jews is good or it didn't happen or Hitler's good. And like
Right.
I saw you like one of your posts the other day, we were talking about Pearl Harbor, and there was like people in the replies, they're like, yeah, that they deserve to die because America didn't sell Japan oil. Those young men in those ships, they deserve
Right.
to die.
Like the embargo was a just war for Japan to, you know, if you don't sell us oil, we're gonna kill 2,400 Americans, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I thought that was totally unhinged too. That really was wild to me. Anyway, go ahead.
But anyway, it's like these leftists. Like I'm gonna use an example from Canada. There's this guy Charlie Angus who was the bane of my existence. He was a long-term NDP. The NDP are the Socialist Party of Canada for all intents and purposes.
Okay, thank you.
MP from Northern Ontario, and I saw him on a protest like earlier this year, not in person, just a video where he's like, "Oh yeah, my family." He was protesting Pierre Poilievre, the conservative leader of Canada, who has a gay father and a Mexican wife. Just to clarify, he was calling Pierre Poilievre a Nazi and saying like, "Oh, my uncle was kicking Nazi butts all over Europe. I have a long history of people who fight Nazis in my family." It's like his uncle was probably a raging racist who would kill a black guy if he dated his daughter. Okay, like, that's the average mentality of a World War II soldier, like born in the 1920s. And I hate how he said kicking Nazi butts. So that's a romanticization of war. Like World War II soldiers were traumatized because they were forced to kill German children in self-defense. Like at the end of the war, the Germans were sending like 8-year-olds with guns to their front line who just fucking charge at like Allied soldiers, and these guys would shoot them in self-defense and then be traumatized, suicidal, whatever, for the rest of their life. Like I just hate people who romanticize war. And like people like him, it's like they call everyone they don't like a Nazi, so they figure, hey, I'll be a Nazi, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I do. Sorry, you distracted me with the sending 8-year-olds thing. But no, yeah, the Volstrom thing, or the Volkstrom. A lot of people don't know about that with like the Hitler's Youth guys that did get sent out there, and I'm not sure they were young as 8. I think like 12 or something. I think is probably, but
Yeah, but it's still bad.
oh yeah, no, it's still horrific, and I agree. I think there's definitely something to that. In fact, I mean about the romanticization of war, like you're talking about. I had to, I kind of like, I had a minute where I like repented of this, you know, just in prayer, because I had posted a few years ago some edit of like allies, it was like some pro allies edit, like Chamberlain and stuff, or Churchill rather, and like bombing Germany. and that clip with like they'll reap the whirlwind and all these things, and it was really the opposite of one of these like fashy edits that you see that are glorifying the Nazis, but it was from the Allies' perspective and with carpet bombing. And as much as I do believe that it was a just war against Germany, I thought about that, and I really did sit right with me, because I was like, no, I don't. I think this is glorifying something that was really horrific, like you're saying. And
Yeah,
seared consciences are really something that people need to be on guard for, and as a Christian, I think like the Holy Spirit informs us for when that's happening and can kind of tug on our heart and say like, no, it's actually really bad, don't do that, or don't glorify that, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Anyway.
and I'd like to discuss something. It's like I'm not defending like Hitler or whatever, but like the Allies did some screwed up shit in World War II. Like Dresden, like it was February 45. For all intents and purposes, the war was over. Like it was after D-Day, after the Battle of the Bulge. It was only a matter of time till Germany fell. But Britain mostly bombed Dresden. It was mostly like women, children, the elderly. Like they dropped a bomb on a literal children's choir in Dresden and killed all the children. I mean, that is a fucking war crime. Like I don't care what their parents or grandparents or relatives did. They are children. They don't have a political ideology. They don't have a belief. They are pure innocence, and the British murdered them. Like I don't care about the actions of the government. That is wrong. It's like it was just revenge. Like the bombing of Dresden was just cold-hearted revenge for what the Germans did to London. You know?
Yeah, I've seen conflicting things around the intentions with Dresden. I'll be honest with you, I have to look into that more to be able to conclude either direction, because I would say that given the inaccuracies in the bombing campaigns as they understood them at that point, and they did understand how inaccurate they were going to be anyway, the bombing of Dresden was definitely a decision that they knew would include a ton of civilian deaths, and they did decide to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Now, it is my understanding that the some of the Dresden stuff, that even the kill counts that were circulated after the war, weirdly enough, were like East German propaganda against the West, even though it was under Soviet rule, which is, or yeah, even though it was under Soviet rule, which is kind of weird. So I'd have to look into that again just to know if the scale of Dresden was worse than what was going on throughout the whole war. And I don't think that would even necessarily make it better. I just don't know how particular Dresden was unique. I think the way that bombing was going on in World War II was just horrific, like kind of like totally across the board. And I think given the date, like you're talking about, there's a very good chance, like you could make a very good argument that Dresden was totally unnecessary. I just would have to look into it a little bit more on the military target claims and stuff like that. But
And
I'm not going to say obviously that. I mean, there were instances where Allies killed prisoners and stuff too. I mean, it's not anybody that wants to sell you a strictly rosy view of one side is totally full of it.
yeah.
Anyway, but
And I know, if I'm pretty sure, like, don't quote me on this, but I think the reason the British in particular bombed Dresden with American approval and some assistance was because it was like it was going to fall to the Soviets. So the Soviets were basically right outside the city. Dresden was a major industrial hub. They had a lot of
yeah,
like
that could be maybe. I don't know. Yeah, that
they
would make
didn't want the
sense.
Soviets to have it. Basically, that's
Fair,
my
yeah. Well, and
understanding.
I've changed my opinion on the nukes in Japan too. I used to think that those were justified, and um, oddly enough, one of the Japanese guys that coordinated Pearl Harbor later became a Christian and was very open about saying that he thought that dropping the nukes was the right decision, which I think is wild. But I disagree with him. My conclusion upon looking at that was that that was not that was not the right call, and I don't think was in accordance with like a just war theory. I think we probably could have blockaded them and sat it out, and I think that ultimately would have been better than nuking them like we did in terms of
I can
killing people.
Yeah, personally, I can never, regardless of what the government did, I can never justify the murder of children. Like little babies in the cradle were bombed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Like I just can't vibe with that, you know?
Yeah, I mean it's mass casualty events, and those necessarily including women and children really should be, like, in my opinion, off the table. And I think I mean, God, thanks be to God that largely in modern warfare that can be, if we have the will to do that, just because we can do accurate bombing and things like this. But it's only, it's up to us to kind of demand that as it happens, which is harder than it really seems like. Anyway.
Yeah, I have more opinion on the Japanese-American War. In fact, I'm going to start on the book I'm reading. Write an essay on Japanese-American relations on prior to World War II, like the 50 years
really?
leading up to it. Yeah, I'm going to have some spicy takes in there, to put it bluntly. I don't think I'll make anyone happy with that one. But anyway, I'd just like to talk about another war crime that goes underreported. Like, are you aware with the Moroccan behavior following the Battle of Monte Cassino?
No.
So, the Battle of Monte Cassino, which is like just south of Rome, I believe, it was like one of the largest battles of the Italian campaign. It had like everyone was involved in it. Like you had
Right.
like American, Canadian, British, Indian, South African, Greek, like Senegalese soldiers, French soldiers, Polish. In fact, the Polish captured Monte Cassino by the end of the battle, and Moroccans were brought over by the French colonial regime, the Free French forces. And the Moroccans, just really blunt, they committed mass sexual assault of women and girls, like as young as like 8 years old, around the villages of Monte Cassino, and not just the women and girls, also boys. Like they sexually assaulted. Not going to say the R word, but anywhere from 7 to 8,000 women and girls, and 500 to 600 men and boys. It's like it is horrific what they did and what the French knew what they were doing. Like an American soldier witnessed some horrible things happening to women by Moroccans. He went to their French officer. It was like, hey, man, what the hell? Like, aren't you going to do anything, execute them, whatever? He was like,
Right.
if the French officer said to him, that's like, others conduct war in their own way, which is basically saying we're going to let these Moroccans do what they want with these women because we hate Italians. Like, we hate that they allied with Germany against us, whatever. This is
Right.
revenge.
Right.
It's like,
Well, and that's the difference, dude. That's the difference between this is gonna get me in hot water too. That's the difference between the French Catholic mentality and the Anglo Protestant mentality around cultural tolerance, because the Anglo Protestant mentality is like ending wife burnings in India, whereas the French one is, oh, we'll just like let this happen. You like, this is their culture, Anyway, that's my take, but continue.
yeah. And just to go off topic, like I was taught about cultural relativism in college by my human rights professor.
Yeah,
I
gross.
was sick the day. Like I was told about a week before the class, but I was sick the day that was going to be about entire like cultural relativism. And I'm glad I was sick that day because I would have like torn her a new one. I would have like I had an entire script in my head. I was going to talk about like female genital mutilation,
Oh yeah.
Africa, widow
Right.
burden in India, and a whole bunch of other stuff like foot
Well,
binded in China.
ask. I
I
mean, it's easy to ask in those. At least when I was in college, rape culture was the big thing, and it was like,
Yeah,
okay, like, are we going to be cultural relativists about rape culture? Like,
yeah.
if you think that exists on this campus, are you indifferent about it because it's my culture? Like, come on, dude. It's just that one. Cultural relativism is just. I think any way you slice it is a bunch of crap. But
Just moral relativism, like any form of
yeah.
that, is cancer. It is
Well,
cancer.
absolutely. And it's not I mean, it's all secularism. Like I'm really, if there's one big boogeyman that I blame everything on, it's secularism. I
Yeah.
really think it's just that all the way down. I don't know if you're a believer or not, or whatever, what tradition you may be a part of in Christianity, but I think anywhere that we lack fundamental Christian behavioral expectations and standards, and a population that largely really believes that stuff is just going to go to complete trash. Anyway.
Yeah,
You got me for like 5 more minutes, so.
While we still have more time, I'd like to talk about sources of revisionism, particularly World War II. I'd like to talk about David Irvin and the Institute of Historical Review. So, what are your thoughts on Irvin and the Institute of Historical Review?
So Mark Weber from the Institute of Historical Review, he's kind of on the if I'm going to make a spectrum or whatever of this, I would put Weber and IHR on the kind of a little bit better end of the revisionists. Because Weber, since the Goebbels diary stuff really got prominent and translated and circulated through these circles, or circulated through these groups, he was pretty quick to just kind of accept it as actual evidence of killing of Jews happening, right? He's just like, yeah, this happened, because Goebbels is like, yeah, the ones we sent east, 60% of them we're going to liquidate, the rest of them have to be slaves. And we know from Wannsee that the ultimate plan for those who were slaves was going to be killed anyway because of natural selection issues and stuff like this that they were concerned about. And Weber kind of always admitted that. Their stuff was kind of, people said that he stopped being a revisionist. I think he's still a revisionist. He just stopped being what would be broadly understood as a Holocaust denier, really. Irving is also a little bit on this, where I've seen clips of him say that millions of Jews were killed.
2.2 million was. I saw a video that I think you reposted.
Right.
It was it's like an operation, whatever. The Germans killed 2.2 million Jews.
Yeah, I mean, between Einstadt's group and Barbarossa and stuff, it's definitely you can't. I don't think you can deny that. I don't think there's any way you can cut it, and that's why with the Coda people, with what they're this wasn't happening at all, or it was all accidental. Basically, it's this is just incidental and or whatever. Those type groups I don't have really any respect for. They're kind of on the other end of it.
But we'd just like to talk a little more about Irvin. By the way, I have not, for clarification's sake, I've not read anything by David Irvin, so I don't want to extensively comment on an author who I've not read. But basically, from what I understand, is that he's gone all over the place in his career with World War II. I know in Hitler's War, which was published in the 70s, he was Joseph Goebbels and Heinrich Himmler, they orchestrated the murder of Jews while Hitler was in the dark.
Right. That used to be his perspective, and then the Goebbels diary stuff kind of shifted it, from what I understand, that he was no, Hitler must have known about this kind of thing. I think it was always kind of silly to presume Hitler didn't know what was going on. I think it's actually a little bit it's almost a little bit degrading to Hitler to think that he just had no clue. I think that's silly. I am not certain to what extent he knew about all the the mechanisms of the extermination camps or whatever. I think that's probably who knows. But the idea this wasn't ultimately at his behest and that he didn't know what was going on, I think is silly. And I think Irving has come around to that perspective. But he still sells his books to people that maybe on the other end of things. And so I think he doesn't really go around touting that very much. But you can still find clips of him saying, like you were talking about,
Yeah. And even recently, I saw a video from him. I don't know when it was. He looks old in it. This is probably last 5 to 10 years, where he's at Auschwitz, however many Jews were killed. I think he said 200,000, and some were gassed. And he originally said that murder through gas in World War II didn't exist in the 90s. But I don't know if he's changed his mind. You should have seen the frickin' cope in the comment section of that video. The
man.
CIA, they got to him, and the AI and blah blah
Oh
blah.
no, that's what they say about Weber and stuff. Yeah, they do all that. I mean, it's it's pretty transparent what's going on. I think to anybody who's not motivated in this kind of thing, but
and I'd like to say briefly with the Institute Historical Review, while I don't agree with a lot of what they say, a lot of their beliefs of different authors that they have, I do think there's some merit to some of their writing. So they can touch on stuff, or will touch on stuff, that like other historical sources won't touch. Even though I don't agree with them, I would still use them as a source, or think there is merit in many of the writings. I'd like to say it's like Weber. I saw an interview with him like when in like the 80s or 90s or something. He said like, yeah, they killed Jews, they intentionally did blah blah blah. We want to know, are there any like academics, like nerds with PhDs, who or like authors who legitimately say and believe that like, yeah, no Jewish people were murdered in World War II? Like, is there even one guy who believes that? Like,
no, I mean, I don't. No, not academically. No. No, I don't think so. And I think ultimately a lot of the people that are in that camp, they don't really care about that anyway, because they don't care enough about institutions to take that to mean anything. Which is in itself a whole nother kind of can of worms. But really all this stuff, the point that's frustrating to me on this is this topic really shouldn't be what's being focused on the right, and it just seems to be focused on the right so much lately. I did not care about this topic until it became theologically and politically relevant in the circles that I run in. It's not like I have some undying interest in World War II. It actually sounds like from this conversation, you probably have more broad interest in World War II than I do. I just kind of felt specifically gifted maybe around some of the theological stuff to kind of sift through it that I hadn't seen done in the way that I wanted yet. But the longer we spend on the right just attacking whatever random tool the left can pick up and use against us, the longer we're not addressing a lot of the deeper disparities between values that we have with people on the left. And it just seems like such an unproductive sort of tactic to try to deny things that seem very obviously to be the case. And getting into the weeds on 5.2 versus 2 million versus 7 million, like, it's just totally not edifying to anybody, frankly. But anyway.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's a very unproductive thing to like play apologist for Hitler or World War II German leaders. I think like there's an argument to be had for like German civilians. They were duped, like they were screwed over big time by the Treaty of Versailles. Like, it makes sense that they would look for a radical leader, look for a scapegoat, whatever.
Right.
And I do understand like demythologizing World War II. Like, there's a lot of like demonization of like average German people, both in the West and today. Like, German people, in Germany, German people, civilians are, demonized and treated as a unique evil. Like, they were the only people who like murdered people for their race or religion in human history. It's not like the Ottoman Empire killed 2 million Armenians 20 years before World War I or anything. Like, that definitely did happen.
Yeah, I mean, so I grew up in Texas, and so part of what was the Confederacy in the South, and I definitely felt growing up a lot more of a historical vindictiveness against me broadly because of the South than I did because of my family being German. And my family is German. Like, my grandmother was in the Hitler's Youth, right? Like, that's true, actually. And so I never, I guess, growing up, was made to feel that Germans were evil. And so that's kind of a weird one to me. And I think Germans themselves have that more, like, for themselves than I've seen imposed upon them.
Yeah.
But I would agree that it's like, I'm not one of these people that's like, I don't use the phrasing of like never forget type thing. Like it's part of history. I think as a Christian, there are moral lessons to be learned from history. And in that sense, yeah, don't forget that. But I do my best to not hold it in some sort of hyper mythologized position. I usually say that what needs to happen is we don't really need to reduce how much or how horrible we think Nazi Germany was. We just need to really focus largely on increasing to where I think would be accurate how horrible and horrific we view communism. And I think in the US, at least, we used to have that. I mean, like during the Cold War, being a communist was just, repugnant. And that has dissipated very unfortunately. And I think the conservatives, the boomers today, have let that happen. And that's my issue. And I'll support guys like Praxbin if you've seen him around, because he does. He's around, and he goes on like TikTok and argues with tankies and stuff, and he's got really well cited info, and he talks about all of the Soviet atrocities, and that's really, I think, where he fits in really well. And I am going to support those guys 110% because I think that that's really what needs to happen. Is like we just need to be looking at history through a biblical lens and calling it as we see it, and when it's not aligned with Christian morality and how we're perceiving things, we need to adjust for that. And I think that adjustment includes viewing the Soviet atrocities as horrific as they were, which we haven't done. But anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, it was great talking to you about revisionism, not our guy. But I think that we'll be we're at an hour and 6 minutes. I think we'll be wrapping up for now. Do you have any parting words for the audience?
No, I appreciate you having me on, and this has been a good chat. I'm going to be on a Twitter space here in a minute after this. That I guess we're not streaming now, but that may be recorded. One other thing I want to mention is that I have I'm not sure when you're going to post this, but I have a pretty long video around the Holocaust coming out. It should be like the Monday, the week of Christmas, so like in a week from now or more, or a little bit over a week from now. So that's one that I'm pretty proud of. It's a little bit under 3 hours, and it's not just me droning on. It's like very tightly edited, maybe cuts every 10 or 15 seconds with different documents and all kinds of info. So if you guys are interested in that, I'm going to be dropping that, and I'd definitely like to get some eyeballs on that, get some critiques on that, get that circulated. So
looking forward to that. I would like to announce that I'm working on, we'll start working on 2 different essays on the Second World War, the diplomacy leading up to it. I'll write one, like a massive one. I have like a general outline already thought up of Japanese-American relations leading up to Pearl Harbor, and another one on Western Allied war crimes, like Dresden, Pearl Harbor, the Moroccan thing I was talking about earlier, also in the brainstorming stage I'm looking forward to.
Sweet. Yeah. I'll definitely be looking forward to that too. So I don't read your Substack as much as I should, but it seems like you're a relatively insightful guy, and I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, it was great to have you on. See you all in the next one.
Take care.
Take care.